Before sunrise, when the windows of Blackthorn Hall were still dark and the servants were too tired to speak, Ilara Vane carried a steaming cup of tea across the frost-covered courtyard. She always took the same path. Past the kitchen door. Past the silent carriage-house. Past the iron trough where the horses drank. And finally to the stables. There, beneath a broken lantern, a young man was usually waiting. His name was Rowan Ashford, though no one at Blackthorn Hall believed there was anything remarkable about him. To Lord Harrowmere, he was merely another stable hand. Poor, replaceable, and beneath notice. Rowan never complained about the cold. He never complained when the other servants mocked his worn boots. Most of all, he never complained when Garrick Vale, the estate steward, deliberately gave him the dirtiest work. But Ilara noticed. She noticed everything. One morning, she placed the tea beside him. "You'll freeze before winter ends if you keep working without breakfast." Rowan glanced at the cup. "You brought this for me?" "I bring it every morning." "I know. I was wondering why." Ilara frowned. "Because you're cold." He stared at her for a moment, then smiled. "You are the strangest person in this house. And you're the rudest." His smile deepened. It was the first time Ilara had seen him look genuinely happy. Their friendship became a secret habit. She brought tea. He waited for her. She shared pieces of bread. He repaired the torn hem of her dress. When she developed a painful blister from working in thin shoes, Rowan quietly carved a pair of wooden insoles and slipped them beneath her bed. Neither spoke about why their small acts of kindness mattered so much. At Blackthorn Hall, kindness was dangerous. Lord Harrowmere ruled his estate through fear. A servant who broke a plate could lose a week's wages. A girl who answered back could be dismissed without a reference. A man who challenged the steward could find himself outside the gates before sunset. Ilara had learned to keep her head down. Rowan had not. One bitter afternoon, Garrick accused him of stealing a silver riding spur. "I didn't take it," Rowan said. Garrick struck him. Ilara dropped the linens in her arms. "Stop." Garrick turned toward her. "You should remember your position." He raised his hand. Rowan caught his wrist. The stable went silent. For a moment, the young man's expression was utterly different. There was no fear in his eyes, only a cold authority that made even Garrick hesitate. "You will not touch her," Rowan said. Garrick pulled free and sneered. "You're a stable boy." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Perhaps." He released him. But even a stable boy can recognize a coward. Garrick stormed away, promising revenge. Ilara waited until they were alone. "You shouldn't have done that. He was going to hurt you. He could have had you beaten. He already tried." She looked at the bruise forming across his cheek. "Why don't you ever defend yourself?" Rowan lowered his eyes. "Because I've spent most of my life learning when to remain silent." Something in his answer unsettled her. Before she could ask what he meant, a black carriage thundered through the estate gates. A sealed letter was delivered to Lord Harrowmere. Within minutes, the entire household knew that the Duke of Ravensmere had died unexpectedly. His heir, missing for 12 years, was believed to be dead. But Lord Harrowmere did not look surprised. He looked terrified. That evening, Ilara passed his study and heard his voice through the closed door. "No. The boy cannot be allowed to reach Ravensmere." Ilara stopped breathing. The voice on the other side replied softly, "Then finish what you started 12 years ago." She stepped backward. A floorboard creaked. The door opened. Garrick stood there. For the first time, Ilara saw fear in his eyes. And behind him, on Lord Harrowmere's desk, lay a faded portrait of a young nobleman. The face was unmistakable. It was Rowan. Ilara could not move. The portrait on Lord Harrowmere's desk showed a boy of perhaps 12, dressed in velvet and silver, with the same dark eyes she had seen every morning beneath the stable's broken lantern. Rowan. Her fingers tightened around the folded linens in her arms. Garrick noticed. "You saw nothing." Ilara forced herself to breathe. "I was looking for the kitchen." You're standing outside the master's study. I know. Garrick stepped closer. If you value your position, forget what you heard. She lowered her gaze. Yes, sir. But she did not forget. That night, she waited until the household slept before going to the stables. Rowan was sitting beside the horses, cleaning a saddle by candlelight. You know, Elara whispered. His hands stopped. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Rowan sighed. Who told you? No one had to. She pulled the portrait she had secretly taken from the study's discarded papers from beneath her shawl. He stared at it. You were born the Duke of Ravensmere. My father was. And you, the heir. Elara felt anger rising beneath her fear. How long have you known? Since I was old enough to understand why men were trying to kill me. He told her the truth in fragments. 12 years earlier, Rowan's father had died under suspicious circumstances. Before the funeral, Lord Harrowmere had arranged for the young heir to disappear. A loyal servant had smuggled Rowan out of Ravensmere, intending to return him when the danger passed. But the servant had been murdered. Rowan had survived alone. Eventually, he found work at Blackthorn Hall under a false name, waiting for the right moment to reclaim his inheritance. I thought you were simply different, Elara whispered. I am simply different. No. You're a duke. Not yet. She looked toward the manor. What does Harrowmere intend to do? Rowan's expression hardened. Whatever he must to keep me from reaching Ravensmere. Before Elara could answer, footsteps approached. Rowan extinguished the candle. Garrick entered with 2 armed men. Search the stable. Elara's heart hammered. Rowan pulled her behind a stack of hay. The men searched every stall. One of them approached their hiding place. Elara covered her mouth to silence her breathing. Then a horse suddenly kicked its stall door. The man turned. Rowan seized the opportunity. He slipped through the rear entrance with Elara following close behind. They ran into the forest. Branches tore at Elara's dress as they raced beneath the moonlight. We need to reach the main road, Rowan said. Where? Ravensmere. You can't go there alone. I won't. He looked at her. You're coming with me. A gunshot cracked through the trees. Elara stumbled. Rowan caught her hand. Run. They reached an abandoned hunting lodge just before dawn, believing they had escaped their pursuers. They were wrong. Silas Crow was waiting. He was Harrowmere's most feared mercenary, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his mouth and no hesitation in his eyes. Well, Silas said, drawing his pistol, the missing heir has finally stopped hiding. Rowan stepped in front of Elara. Let her go. Silas laughed. She is the reason you're careless. Elara looked at Rowan. He had spent years concealing his identity. He had survived because he trusted no one. Yet now he was willing to risk everything for her. Silas ordered his men to bind them. Elara's wrists were tied first. As they dragged Rowan toward the lodge, she noticed an oil lamp hanging beside a curtain. Then she saw the dry wooden beams above it. An idea formed. She waited until no one was watching. Then she kicked the lamp from its hook. It shattered. Flames raced across the floor. Fire! The mercenaries panicked. Rowan broke free and reached Elara. Can you walk? She nodded. Then stay close. Smoke swallowed the room. A burning beam crashed between them and the door. Rowan pushed Elara behind him and took the full force of the falling debris across his shoulder. Rowan! He gritted his teeth. Go. I won't leave you. You have to. No. She grabbed a broken chair leg and attacked the burning beam with everything she had. Together they cleared enough space to escape. They stumbled into the forest as the lodge collapsed behind them. For the first time, Rowan allowed himself to lean against her. You should have left me. Elara looked into his exhausted eyes. You brought me tea when you had nothing. He gave a faint smile. And you remember that? Every morning. He reached for her hand. I don't know what happens after this. Neither do I. But if I survive, I want to come back for you. Ilara's heart raced. Come back as what? Rowan looked toward the distant road. As the man I was born to be. Then riders appeared through the morning mist. Their horses carried the silver crest of Ravensmere. The leader dismounted, dropped to one knee before Rowan, and bowed his head. Your Grace. Rowan straightened. Ilara realized the life they had known was over. And somewhere beyond the forest waited a duchy, a stolen inheritance, and a war for the truth. The riders took Rowan and Ilara to Ravensmere before sunrise. For the first time in 12 years, Rowan crossed the gates of the estate that should have been his home. He did not smile. He stared at the towering stone walls, the silver banners, and the great hall beyond them as though they belonged to a stranger. They remember you, the captain said. Rowan shook his head. They remember my father. Inside, the household gathered in stunned silence. The elderly housekeeper, Mara Belwyn, dropped to her knees when she saw him. My lord. Rowan helped her rise. I am no lord to you until the truth is proven. Mara touched his face with trembling fingers. You have your mother's eyes. The words struck him harder than any blow. His mother had been murdered shortly after his father's death. For 12 years, Rowan had carried only a faded memory of her voice. Now, standing in the home she had once shared with him, he finally understood how much had been stolen. The following morning, the Ravensmere Council assembled. Lord Harrowmere had already sent word that Rowan was an impostor. He claimed the real heir had died years ago. Then he produced a witness who swore that Rowan had never been part of the Ashford family. Rowan listened without interruption. When the witness finished, Rowan removed a signet ring from beneath his shirt. The council chamber fell silent. The ring carried the Ravensmere crest. Mara stepped forward. I watched his father place that ring around the boy's neck the night before the Duke died. The witness immediately looked away. Rowan understood. Harrowmere had expected him to return frightened and alone. He had not expected witnesses to survive. He had not expected Ilara. She stepped into the chamber. I have evidence. She placed Harrowmere's letters on the table. The room erupted in whispers. The letters contained payments to Silas Crowe and instructions concerning Rowan's disappearance. The council ordered Harrowmere to appear before them. But before the guards could leave, an arrow smashed through the window. The witness fell dead. Panic swept through the chamber. Get Ilara out, Rowan shouted. Another arrow struck the door. Rowan grabbed her hand and pulled her into a narrow corridor. They're trying to destroy the evidence. Then we protect it. They hurried toward the archive room. Behind them, armed men stormed the castle. Silas Crowe had followed them. Rowan locked the archive door. Ilara pressed her back against it. Can we escape? There is another way. He pulled an old tapestry aside, revealing a hidden passage. They descended into darkness. The passage led beneath the castle and opened near the cliffs. But Silas was waiting there. You've always been difficult to kill, he said. Rowan stepped forward. You failed once. Silas smiled. I won't fail twice. The fight was brutal. Rowan was stronger, but Silas had years of experience. A blade sliced across Rowan's arm. Ilara saw the dagger fall near her feet. She seized it and struck Silas's wrist. He dropped his weapon. Rowan tackled him. The two men crashed against the stone wall. Then the cliff beneath them cracked. Silas slipped. Rowan caught his wrist. For one terrible moment, Silas dangled over the abyss. Let me fall, he gasped. Rowan tightened his grip. No. You owe me nothing. That is exactly why I won't become you. He pulled Silas to safety. The guards arrived moments later. Silas was arrested. The evidence survived. Within days, the council formally recognized Rowan as the rightful Duke of Ravensmere. But victory did not immediately make him happy. That evening, Ilara found him alone in his father's study. You won, she said. Rowan looked at the empty chair behind the desk. I gained a title. You also gained a home. He looked at her. I gained you. Elara smiled. Then his expression changed. There is something I need to ask. She waited. I know what the court will say. That you are a duke? That you're beneath me? Elara's smile faded. Rowan crossed the room. I spent 12 years pretending to be someone insignificant. You were the only person who treated me as though I mattered. He took her hand. I don't want a duchess chosen by the council. He lowered himself to one knee. I want the woman who brought tea to a cold stable every morning. Elara stared at him in disbelief. Rowan. Before she could answer, the doors burst open. Mara stood there, breathless. My lord, there is one more letter. Rowan rose. From whom? Mara handed it to him. The seal belonged to his late father. Rowan broke it open. His eyes moved across the page. Then all the color drained from his face. Elara stepped closer. What does it say? Rowan looked at her. My father knew he was going to die. He handed her the letter. At the bottom was a single sentence. If Rowan ever returns, tell him the truth about the woman who saved his life. Elara looked up. What woman? Rowan stared at the final line. Neither of them knew that the greatest secret of Ravensmere had not been about the missing heir at all. Elara read the letter twice before she understood the meaning of its final words. The woman who saved Rowan's life was not a stranger. It was Rowan's mother. But the letter revealed something neither of them had known. Before the Duke's death, his wife had discovered that Harrowmere planned to murder their son and seize Ravensmere. She had secretly arranged for Rowan to be taken away, then remained behind to mislead the assassins. She had not been murdered. She had escaped. And for 12 years, she had lived under another name. Rowan could barely breathe. She survived. Mara nodded through tears. The Duke ordered me to tell you only when you were safe. The letter contained one final clue, a village name beyond the northern hills. Rowan and Elara left before dawn. They found the woman in a small cottage beside a frozen lake. When the door opened, Rowan stopped. An older woman stood before him. Her eyes filled with tears. Rowan. He did not move. Then she whispered the childhood name only his mother had ever used. Little Star. He crossed the room and fell into her arms. For the first time since childhood, Rowan allowed himself to cry. Elara waited outside until they had spoken privately. When Rowan finally emerged, his expression had changed. My mother said something about you. Elara looked uncertain. What? She said you reminded her of herself. Elara laughed softly. I don't think I understand. She said the people who survive cruelty sometimes become cruel themselves. But she hoped I would meet someone who would teach me otherwise. He took Elara's hand. She was talking about you. They returned to Ravensmere together. This time, Rowan did not enter as a frightened heir. He entered as Duke. But his first decree surprised the council. He abolished the old servants' punishments. He ordered fair wages, proper housing, and protection for every worker on his lands. Then he did something no one expected. He reopened the abandoned school beside the stables. Elara watched as children entered through its doors for the first time. You've changed everything, she whispered. No, Rowan replied. You showed me what needed changing. Weeks later, the wedding was announced. The court protested. A former servant could not become duchess. Rowan ignored them. The wedding took place in the old stable where Elara had once brought him tea. Mara arranged flowers along the wooden beams. The horses stood quietly behind the guests. Elara walked toward Rowan wearing a simple ivory gown. When she reached him, he whispered, You still look like the girl who brought me tea. And you still look like the stable boy who never said thank you. He smiled. Then allow me to correct that. He took her hands. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else saw nothing. Elara's eyes filled with tears. I would have brought you tea even if you had remained a stable boy. I know. They married beneath the same roof where their story had begun. But their happiness held one final surprise. Months later, Rowan led Elara into the garden. A new building stood beside the roses. Its doors opened into a bright tea room connected to a school and a small infirmary. "What is this?" she asked. "Our promise." "To whom?" "To every person who was once treated as though they were worth less." Elara looked around. Children studied nearby. Servants ate at long tables. No one lowered their eyes in fear. Then Rowan handed her a cup. She laughed. "You made the tea?" "I did." She took a sip and immediately grimaced. "It's terrible." Rowan stared at her. "Terrible. Awful." He laughed so loudly that the children outside turned toward the window. Elara leaned against him. "You were better at being a duke. And you were better at making tea. Then perhaps we should divide our responsibilities." He kissed her forehead. "Agreed." Years later, their daughter would ask why her father had married a servant. Rowan would always give the same answer. "She was kind to me before she knew I was a duke." Then he would look at Elara across the garden table. "She loved me when I had nothing to offer." Elara would raise her cup. "And he came back." That was the part people remembered. Not the cruel lord. Not the stolen inheritance. Not the mercenary who nearly killed them. They remembered a girl who carried tea into a freezing stable every morning. They remembered a young man who had lost everything except hope. And they remembered that when he finally returned as a duke, he did not use his power to become like the people who had hurt him. He used it to build the life they had once believed impossible. Every morning afterward, Elara still made 2 cups of tea. One for herself. One for Rowan. And whenever he entered the room, he would smile and say the same words. "Good morning, my Duchess." She would answer, "Good morning, my stable boy." And somehow, after everything they had survived, those 2 words remained the sweetest titles either of them had ever known.